Hey, welcome back to Get Uncomfortable and welcome to our home. Tonight we got a very special episode. I got my beautiful wife Ashley here, and tonight we're gonna have a very personal episode. We're gonna have a really candid chat, just regarding grief and turning grief into purpose after experiencing major loss of losing Ashley's mom at the age of 53 about 6 years ago. So let's get into it. So yeah, we're welcome. Thanks for joining us today for this conversation. I think it's a really important one to have. For us. After Ashley's mom passed away, just the conversations around grief have been very enlightening and helpful in our household. And so we wanted to share that. We wanted to share that with all of my millions of viewers and subscribers. And just feel like it's an important one to get out there. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This is take 2. We did a whole episode last weekend, and the audio was garbage, didn't work. So here we are again in our house. Neighbors walking by, wondering what the heck we're doing with the lights on. But kids are asleep, and we have some time to kind of chat through it. Whereas actually where we have most of our good conversations is kind of late at night, and the kids are sleeping and stuff. So. I guess just to kind of jump into it, have you always wanted to work at a funeral home, or is that?
No, never. When I was younger, I was actually quite scared of caskets and anything death related. So never in a million years would I have ever pictured myself working in a funeral home. I was quite content cutting hair, but 6 years ago that things changed a little bit, and now I'm very happy. And this is where I'm supposed to be, and the best career I've ever chosen.
Yeah. And you get to have a ton of great conversations with people and stuff like that. And obviously we talk a lot about how you get to impact people and how it's super fulfilling for you. Very different than hairdressing.
Yeah, very.
Conversations are probably a little different.
Yep.
I know our conversations at the dinner table are different than they were when you were hairdressing.
Yeah, very.
So cool. So I guess just to kind of give people a little bit of an introduction, or a little bit of a look into your kind of introduction to your mom. Like, I guess, tell us a little bit about your mom. And I guess, what was your mom like?
Everybody always says they have the best mom, but mine was absolutely the best. She loved our family. Like, family was just her life.
Yeah.
So the grandkids were like her number one thing, of course, after when they were born. Before. That's like, family was just her thing. We went through a pretty rough patch when she was little, which I'm blessed that I don't really remember. My mom did have cancer when I was quite young, and I think that changed her outlook on a lot of things in life, and that got instilled in my dad and my brother and myself. So we've always been a very close family, and she's always been like our rock, and just like the absolute most selfless person you could ever imagine. That was her. Yeah.
Very accurate. She was, tremendous. And just like the joy that, she found in hanging out with the kids and stuff was super special. So, I guess, and obviously a huge part of your life, huge part of our life, and a huge part of the girls' lives and stuff like that. So I guess take us back. I don't want to say like, what was it like losing her, but take us back to when that happened. Like, obviously that's a pretty shattering. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, it was very sudden, so that would made it even 10 times worse, I guess you could say, or worse. Yeah. Not that it's any different when you're expecting it, but she was having some health problems, so it kind of still came out of nowhere. And watching that happen and watching somebody take their last breath is one of the most worst pains that I've ever been through, and probably ever will be through. It's a flood of a whole bunch of emotions that you can never explain to anybody, even after being through it. Like, it's unexplainable, and it's really tough. And yeah.
Obviously, wound cuts pretty deep. How do you get through that? Like,
well, you don't. I think is the best way to put that. I think everybody has that expectation with grief that there is a timeline, and after my mom passed. I did a lot of reading and like online grief groups and stuff like that. And I think there's always that expectation where when somebody passes away, it's like tough for a little while, and then eventually you'll just get better. And obviously things change, like that feeling doesn't get better, but you figure out how to navigate and live with that feeling every day. And that changes, and then you change, and yeah, you're not the same person that you ever were before. I think that's a huge thing too. People just like, they say they want to go back to who they used to be, and as much as you want to, it's not possible. And I think accepting that and just knowing that, yeah, that grief is just going to always be with you. You just have to figure out how to live with it.
Yeah, and you reference change a lot, and you've had a lot of growth, and like we already referenced, like our family conversations and family dynamics are all very different, but I like to think we're a stronger family because of it. And yeah, even from the outside looking in, even you and your brother have always been close, but like probably have a stronger bond because of that, and just all that kind of stuff. And again, not that anybody wants to go through something like that. That's not what we're saying. But I guess the growth that comes from those pain points is pretty unreal. The scope of how someone can kind of grow, because you need to. Like you reference books and groups and stuff like that. You need to learn and you need to grow through that, because that's, like you say, it's something you're going to live with for the rest of your life, right? So I guess kind of wrapping up that whole experience and what that did to your mindset and everything like that. How did that experience, and how does that, I hate to call it an experience, but how does that point of that time of your life, how does that change your perspective on life and purpose?
I think the biggest thing that it changes is just to know that like life can just change so quickly, like in the blink of an eye. So to just, like the saying you always hear, like never take life for granted. And I think everybody kind of does. And then when something like this happens, it really hits you like, holy man, like something could just be taken so quickly. And so I think it's just to enjoy like every single moment. And a huge thing is telling people that you love them when you love them. Like just when you have that feeling to just like tell them, because you really don't know.
Yeah. And getting into your, again, like kind of to pull it back to career and stuff like that, just learning through that. And like from what I see, obviously I don't go to work with you, but just using that experience to just serve people, you know what I mean? And just kind of help people along the way. And you've had a lot of impact on a lot of people, and just the stuff that I've learned in how to talk to somebody that's lost a loved one, or, how to try and, that emotional intelligence that I think I'm a pretty emotionally intelligent person, but there's stuff that just, growing up, not having talked about grief and death, and really not having experienced really any death or anything like that of any magnitude in my life as a kid. I think just a lot of that is your mindset going forward, and sharing and teaching and stuff is super valuable, of course, in your new career. So again, like kind of asked you already, but most people don't go through grief and then just like, oh, I want to like surround myself with this every day for the rest of my life. Like how does that transition actually happen?
For me, it was, my mom passed in 2019, so COVID hit right after that. So I was following actually a funeral director in Provost that was doing like Tuesdays with Jer, I think is what it was called. So it was like a grief thing that you could kind of hop onto and like, write questions in the chat, and he would just talk about grief and like the different areas of it. And it was really relatable and very helpful when I was going through that. And I kind of just like followed his page on Instagram, and he was a funeral director. And I was like, man, I don't know if I could do something like that, but I'd really like to do something grief related. And so I kind of just looked into that a bit, got a few books, started reading about like being a funeral director, which I'm not a director at this point, but, and I was like, man, I should see what it's like to work in a funeral home maybe. And Bear Creek, where I currently work, was great with my mom. Like one of the definitely top reasons why I reached out to them was just because like the care that they had for our family and my mother was like the best. So I was like, maybe I'll reach out to somebody there. And then like not long after I kind of was thinking about that, they actually put on their page that they were doing like a career night where you could kind of check out the funeral home and what like a career in funeral services looks like. So I went there, and then I like knew pretty quickly that like, man, these people are amazing, and this is something that I really would like to try. So I ended up doing a course online from Mount Royal University in Calgary for funeral services. That's just an introduction. And I did that. And then after I did that course, I was like, no, this is something I want to do. So I reached out and kind of spent a day at the funeral home and checked it out and did an interview. And thankfully they hired me. And and now I'm a pre-need funeral advisor and funeral service attendant there, and have been for like a year and a half. So it's been really good.
Cool. And, you said thankfully they hired you, but I guess for those of you kind of listening to this or watching this, it wasn't really like, there wasn't a negotiable there. Like Ash really just decided. And I think the one really cool thing that just watching you grow in this last number of years has been like, once you decide, once you make that resolution that that's what's going to happen, like this was something for you that was really like, it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of conversations, and, essentially it was like, this is where I'll be, this is what I'm doing in some capacity. And even if I have to just show up and volunteer to start off, I'm just going to do it. So I think that's the really cool thing about, just that mindset of making that decision and sticking to it. And I think is really cool. By no means, I don't want to sound like everybody that loses a loved one has to have this big purpose-filled journey or anything like that. I think our conversation just really more steers towards saying, in a super dark time, there is certain things you can learn through it. And just a story of an example of like what Ashley has done to take a really brutal time of her life and find a way to kind of find that purpose and push through that, not push through the grief, but like build yourself up with that grief hanging overhead, I guess. Just a little bit of an aside. So you decided you wanted to be at the funeral home. You decided, because of the people and how they've treated you guys and your family and your mom through that process, that's what you wanted to do. But was that an instant realization?
No, I think it took, quite a few. Like I knew that I wanted to do something grief related, probably a couple years into it, because now grief was a huge part of my life. And once I kind of started feeling a bit differently about it and just kind of dealing with it a little bit better, I started realizing that like, man, there's so many people that go through this and that need the help. Like, how could I help, or where could I help? And then that's just kind of where my mind went. I mean, there's plenty of other ways you can do it, but I just really enjoyed that part of it when I was reading about it and listening to those podcasts and stuff with Tuesdays with Jer. Yeah,
old shameless drop for Tuesdays with Jer. If anybody wants to hit him up, super insightful and helpful. So after that transition, you remember not helping, but kind of being with you as you went through the schooling and stuff like that. But ever since then, do you ever have moments where you're just like, man, I don't know if I can do this?
There's been a few, like when I first started, like my interview was actually in the room that we made my mom's funeral arrangements in. And I was already super nervous going in there because obviously I wasn't really sure if I could do it. And then when they sat me in that room, I was just like shaking. Like I was like, oh man, I don't know if this is a great idea. I don't know if I can do this. And then after I had my interview, I was like, no, this is where I want to be. And I mean, there's times at services and stuff where it's always hard to see like the grieving children or the person that lost their brother or sister or aunt or uncle that's just real upset, and I've been there, so I know what that feels like. So like that can be hard to watch, but also just knowing like you're not alone. Like there's just so many people that deal with that every day, and you don't ever see that, and it's kind of like you're just happy to be there for that family and just help them on that super difficult day that you've been through too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, just that resolution, like I mentioned before too, and that purpose, and, it's leading someone through that dark time, knowing how important that leader is. You know what I mean? It's I don't know, this is probably not a great analogy, but I'm kind of picturing like a Sherpa taking someone up a mountain through a storm, and it's like, or down a mountain, because why would you go up if it's storming? But it's like that Sherpa knows that they're going to be putting themselves through something super difficult, but it's for the greater good, and it's for the person that you're helping, and it's like you that element of sacrifice to help those people get through. So that's just another testament to the purpose side of it, which is really cool. So how does and we kind of talked about it before, but how does working at a funeral home change your view of life and death?
I think the biggest thing is just, and like you kind of, when you lose somebody, you kind of feel that way. But again, just like never taking life for granted, because you see so many people come in there who lose someone suddenly or not. And like, just like, it just really hits you like, holy man, like that's, their life changed in a day, and it's never the same afterwards. And I think like that's, and also, it's just like we talk about death a lot more in our household, which was like we never did before. And it's uncomfortable sometimes, but also it's kind of a conversation that should be brought up from time to time, just, to discuss important things. And I do that a lot at work with families and people making pre-arrangements. So it's always a weird and awkward conversation for some people to have, but it's important, and it's helpful for the families that are left behind. In those moments of grief, it's hard to make those decisions. So it's good to have that to fall back on when you're making those decisions beforehand, so they don't have to. Yeah,
totally. And like you say, it's always an awkward or doesn't have to be an awkward conversation all the time. I think that's part of like the stigma that we wanted to talk about tonight, and just kind of share that with people, and just kind of like have an open conversation about it. Just have another resource, have another thing out there that someone that's going through a really terrible time that can, punch into YouTube and find the word grief, and maybe this resonates with somebody like that kind of thing. But also it's, death is unfortunately like, nobody's going to avoid it. Yeah. Or, it's 2025 now, science is getting pretty good, but it's coming for everybody. And it's a matter of like, we can do everything to live our healthiest life and have as much longevity as possible. But the reality is everyone's going to die, and everyone's going to have people around them pass away. Right. So it's finding, it's probably the only thing that everyone in the world has in common, I guess. Like realistically, you need food, water, and sunlight to live. And I don't know if that's actually a fact. I assume so. Maybe I'm thinking of trees.
Bill Nye.
Yeah. Bill. This is a serious episode. No, sorry. So food, water, and death kind of thing, right? So, but that was a terrible time for a Bill Nye joke. But again, something everybody has to talk about at some point in time, and sometimes humor gets you through it, right? So, so what is, I guess I'm going to go back to the humor thing.
Yeah.
So how, I guess I'll ask you the question. How did your family kind of cope with grief in a lot of ways?
I mean, humor, not in like a weird way.
No, sorry. Yeah.
But like, I mean, we're a very not serious family, I guess you could say. Like jokes are always had. Yeah. So, I think that's important, like to laugh is just, and my mom would have wanted that. Like, I know people say that all the time, and like, this is what they would have wanted. And, she would have wanted us to be joking and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So we do. And I just talked about this with a family member of mine tonight, about how like sometimes when you're uncomfortable, you joke and laugh, because that's all you can do to make yourself feel better. And that's kind of what we did from time to time. I mean, also a billion tears. I mean, you could be joking and laughing, and then 5 seconds later you're in an absolute meltdown of a mess.
Yeah.
But I mean, you kind of have to in certain moments, and even dealing with families at work, you can kind of read the family. And there is people that come in with like a lot of humor, and then obviously the other end of the spectrum where it's obviously it's not a joke, and it's not, but there is families like that's how they deal with it, and that's okay. Like whatever works for you, whatever works for your family is fine.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's why I bring it up, because it's not, grief isn't something that is a carbon copy for everybody. And sometimes it's, we have a lot of conversations, and we'll always have conversations about your mom and stuff like that. And sometimes those conversations are like, one of the kids will tell the joke and somebody will say like, oh, grandma would think that's funny, kind of thing. Right. And I think it's just important, again, to realize that for everyone to go through it in a different capacity. But I felt like it was a good time to throw you under the bus and kind of say like, humor for our family and for like your dad and your brother and stuff like that, regardless of the situation, it's, there's always humor involved. Right.
We're funny people.
Yeah. Funny people. So what's something, I guess, something other than what we've talked about so far, what's something that you've learned in this journey of yours, that is misunderstood about grief?
I think probably the timeline thing is the biggest thing, is just like, and also the talking about it. I think a lot, and I do understand that, because like when you lose somebody, and like I'm pretty bad for it. Like even at the beginning when you said, what was your mom like my eyes just like instantly filled with tears, and they are again. But people like want to talk about their loved one. I think when people pass, or when somebody passes, you don't want to say anything because you're afraid to upset them. And like, yeah, they probably will get upset, or maybe not, but also that's okay. Like they usually want to talk about that person. So even though it's uncomfortable and they might cry a lot, just like let them talk about it. And and the timeline thing is huge. Like I think at the beginning you always think like, man, I should be feeling better now, or like everybody just thinks that like you have the time frame off work and you go back to work and you should just feel better, but that's not the case. I mean, some people do move through it at different paces and do feel better, maybe a little bit quicker than others, but it took me an extremely long amount of time to get to where I am. So everybody's different. Which
I think is, and it's definitely not something just going through this and learning about it. Definitely not something that even has, like, it's not a completion date.
No,
you know what I mean?
Never,
like some people have different stages at different points. And it's like,
that's another one too, is that when I read about grief, was they say like, I don't know if they really say this anymore, but there's like the 5 stages of grief. There's like anger, denial, and all. And that's, I mean, those do come, but they say like there's like this one comes first, and that's not the case at all. Like it's just all over the place always. Yeah. And I think just having that, just don't have any expectations, I think is the best way to put that. Like just don't think that you should be somewhere or feeling a certain way by a certain time, because it doesn't matter. Like go at your own pace, feel how you want to feel,
and maybe find some benefit in and finding a purpose. You know what I mean? And like having something, and whether it's conversations or not, like the conversations can be uncomfortable with somebody, but just to have that uncomfortable conversation that they might really want to have. You know what I mean? Like it's even just talking about, with my grandma, it's like she carries grief, and my mom, and like all these people carry grief, or your dad with his family and stuff carry grief from the past, but it's like, it doesn't mean they don't want to talk about it. It's just, maybe it doesn't come up every single day in conversation, but it's definitely something that there's healing that comes from those conversations for sure. And for us, like for me, I kind of referenced earlier, we didn't really have, loss for us was like my great grandmother, you know what I mean, when I was young. And so I thought it was pretty interesting in just going through, and for me learning through that process, and even just like I remember being in the hotel in Edmonton when you were doing your pre-needs study, and we were going through the courses and stuff like that. So something that would typically be very uncomfortable for me, where going through and reading, I don't even remember it now, but like the different types of funeral services and stuff like that. I remember we took, it was whatever,
studying time,
studying time, an hour and a half or whatever, sitting on the hotel beds, and which started out as a pretty, like for me anyways, you were already studying and it was the night before your test, but for me it was like, I don't typically read a book on cremations and then, you know, quiz somebody else on it. So for me, it was started off as a pretty uncomfortable thing, but then it turned into a very enlightening process, right? A very, very helpful thing for me to understand what you went through, what you go through every day, and like what a lot of people go through with different belief systems and different beliefs in you know, the funerals and stuff like that. So I think just all that, just the conversations that can be had, I think are super beneficial and don't need to be shied away from or anything like that. So again, kind of going back to like your day to day, is there any moments that get too heavy for you at work or too difficult, or how do you manage that? Like obviously there's got to be some services that are more difficult than others. There's got to be some families, like you said, some families come in and obviously very distraught. If you're in one of those situations that are really, really tough, like is there a way that you manage that stress?
The services that are the hardest for me, I mean, they're all tough. But obviously, again, it's the ones with like the loss of a mother, because you see like those family members sitting there talking about their mom and breaking down. And like, I've been there before, so it's very tough to watch that. Honestly, in a lot of services, when I get in those positions where I start to feel like upset, I kind of just have to walk away. Like I have to take a moment for myself, and but then also sometimes I kind of just push through it and like listen, because that was their loved one and that was special to them, and it's like it's great to hear those stories, even though they kind of break your heart a little bit. But yeah, and then you know sometimes I have meltdowns when I come home, because it's you like carry that all day long of like seeing all these emotional people and knowing that you've been there and then watching them go through it. But thankfully that's few and far between. That doesn't happen super often, but it's just nice. It's healing in ways to just be there for families who are in the hardest time of their life. Yeah, totally. And it's just, again, those conversations where you might not be right in the thick of it, but somebody needs someone to listen. And that would be very, not rewarding, but healing for them. And I'm sure in a sense it's healing for your own grief that you deal with day to day, is just like, okay, being that person that has seen these situations, or, you know, been in the room when your mother passed away, and then you can go and use that experience to help someone else through that really difficult time yeah. Okay. So on maybe a more upbeat tone, what would be, maybe what's the most rewarding moment that you've seen in your career so far? Like, do you have one that stands out that's, I don't know if I have one specific one that stands out, but I think after we do services, or after I have an appointment with a family, like the relief and the, like, when they say like how happy and grateful and like, you know, appreciative they are of us, I think that's always, that's pretty high. Like you always feel pretty good knowing that they feel well taken care of, because there's a lot that goes into that day that people don't really see. And there's a lot of behind the scenes and difficult moments. And so when they come to you saying like, man, thank you so much. Like this day was beautiful. And just for being here today, thank you. Like, I appreciate that. Like just knowing that you can just help them just that tiny little bit in their moments is, it feels pretty good. And when I do like my pre-need appointments, that's always a huge, like people, like you can tell the tone after is just like a weight is lifted, because they've planned something that's just like uncomfortable, and it's, you know, nobody really wants to make those arrangements, but also knowing that's just taken care of for their family when the time does come is like a weight off their shoulders, and at the time it will be a weight off their family's shoulders. So knowing that you can kind of help them in those moments is pretty special. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, and just, I don't know, I honestly don't even know what you said that spurred this for me, but, the rewarding part. And just kind of, I'm picturing like sometimes when you come home and you talk about the services and you talk about the people that you work with and stuff like that. I think one thing that stood out to me would be the relationships that you've built with your coworkers. And then just really, it's kind of like, if you were to go back to the question I asked earlier about, you know,
what's something that you've learned after being in the industry or starting with Bear Creek? For me, one thing that I've learned after you started was just like the people, right? So the people that work there, work in the industry, it's not like what you would expect all the time, or it's not like...
Yeah, people just assume that people in the funeral industry are sad and...
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just what you'd see on TV or whatever. So, but actually, like, all of my coworkers are great. And a lot of them have actually been through loss. And that makes a huge difference, I think, when taking care of a family. Like, it is one thing to just help them in their loss, but when you've actually experienced it, I think that's a whole nother level. And I think you can kind of see that, like, or maybe it's just me that can, but like the care level is just like, I don't know, you can maybe see it a touch more when somebody's actually went through that loss, because they felt that, and it's not a great feeling, and for them to be there helping you is big for them too.
Yeah, and just, you know, that, again, that emotional intelligence and how everybody has dealt with their own loss, and they can bring that experience to help someone through a tough time, but they also have the ability, like, they're great people, and they you know, they can also be very somber and emotionally intelligent in a quiet situation, but they can also, you know, encourage people at a different setting to, you know, celebrate somebody's life in a different way, right? So, just the people in general has been one thing that I've learned. Anyways, the Christmas parties aren't necessarily what you'd expect.
Yeah, they're fun.
Yeah,
We're
fun.
a great group of people.
Games and stuff like that. Yeah, super people. You know, we were at that service last week actually, and you know, we bumped into one that you work with regularly, and then one that is at a different town, we'll say. But you know, and just the ability to kind of, like, after everybody's taken care of, to go back and have like a conversation, because this is, you know, you think of everybody working a job, it's not like you'd want to go and work 8 hours in a day, 5 days a week, and just be, you know, super
upset,
somber. That'd be a really tough time. So you obviously have to find little breaks and little windows to, you know, remind yourself that, you know,
we're humans too.
Humans, right? And it's important to smile. It's important to enjoy your day and the people you're doing it with and stuff. So, okay. So I guess in the sense of, like, trying to help people through some stuff and help people through grief, if someone out there is watching or listening, and they're dealing with loss, or feeling at a point where they're feeling lost in that journey, what would be the first thing that you would tell them?
Well, one would be to talk and just talk to somebody. Like, I did end up seeing a therapist at one point, in my grief, because I just knew that I wasn't doing it on my own, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think everybody is always like, oh, you know, she went to see a therapist, but, that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. And honestly, I didn't go a lot or for very many sessions, but the few that I went to made a huge difference. And I think talking is just a huge thing. Like, doesn't matter who you're talking to or what you're saying or whatever. Just do it. Like, it doesn't matter if you're making anyone uncomfortable. I think it's just important to talk about it with whoever you have beside you. And I remember seeing, like, the day that my mom passed away, this, like, quote that said something along the lines of, like, one day you'll tell your story of what you're going through, and it'll be someone else's survival guide. And I was like, okay, that's not true. And then the weeks after, I, like, thought of that quote so much, and I was like, this feeling is never going to go away. Like, I am not going to get better. And I was pretty convinced. And now I work in a funeral home helping people in their grief. So like I mean, not saying that anybody has to do big things in their grief, but things do change, and they do. You learn how to deal with the pain every day, but it does change. And I don't know if I want to say it gets easier, but you figure it out. You figure out how to live without your loved one, and just enjoy the people that you have around you for the support. And thankfully I had a great support system, and that's pretty huge in this situation. So grateful for that.
Yeah. And again, like, it's not everybody has to do a big thing, but I guess what we're doing here is, and I've said on previous episodes as well, if we can connect with one person and have some sort of impact on somebody at some point in time, with a blessing that is YouTube and Spotify, pretty much, right? Like if there's someone out there that can get some sort of value out of this, and kind of maybe hearing a story like Ashley's can be the first nudge in a direction of maybe something small, maybe something huge, right? You never know if whatever it could be. So,
I followed actually a lot of people when I was reading after my mom passed, like ladies who have lost their mom. So I've like kind of in a lot of groups of like motherless daughters kind of things, which sounds really sad, but is really helpful. And there's like quite a few who have written books after they have lost their mom, and I've bought a few of them. Most recently, one I read, that book, if I would have read that like 6 years ago, was like to a T how I was feeling. And I was like, man, I wish I would have read this sooner, because this was like there's so many little feelings that you think are like wrong, or like, man, there's something wrong with me. Like, why am I feeling this way? And, but then I read it in that book and I was like, oh man, like other people feel that? Like, that's crazy. I thought it was just me. And so just reading that also gave me a whole lot of comfort, because I'm like, you kind of just feel like sometimes you don't want to say out loud how you're feeling. And when you read that, it's very comforting to know that you're not the only one that feels that way.
Yeah. Do you remember the name of the book?
No, it's right behind me. Now That She's Gone.
Now That She's Gone.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we'll drop a link somewhere, something like that too. Yeah. And I feel like I'm thinking slower than you tonight for some reason, but you said something previously that I want to kind of jump back to. The therapist statement, right? I think that's, again, so not to be a whatever, broken record, I guess is the saying, but like, so after Ashley had her experience seeing a therapist, I went through my own journey to see a therapist, kind of different avenue, but it was super, super valuable. And we would both encourage, we went through a phase, and we still talk about it often with, friends and family and stuff like that. I remember shortly after I did, I was pretty excited about my results from talking to a therapist. And I just like interrupted Christmas dinner, I think it was.
I don't remember.
With Angela's place, and I interrupted Christmas dinner and started telling everybody, and at first it was a little bit of a joke thing, and I was just so resolute that it's like everybody should do it. I think everybody should have that person. I mean, some of us are blessed with really, really supportive support systems, like you said, but even then, it's just to have a trained professional that you can talk to, I think, is super valuable. And that'll be something that we plan to do on the show as well, as have some therapists on. Got one lined up to talk to a local therapist here and share some good stories and just kind of reiterate the importance of that. I think is super valuable. So thanks for bringing that up as well. And actually, I'm going to do a Mind Pump plug, because Mind Pump was one of the ones that you would talk to a therapist, and then I listened to another podcast, Mind Pump, super consistently, and they were really adamant. And it's like a fitness and mindset and business and stuff, kind of challenge your mindset. And they were really adamant that people, I think it was Sal on there that had a couple spiels about how everyone should talk to a therapist. And because I love taking their advice, I took their advice, and I think it was super valuable. So yeah, a little bit of a Mind Pump plug as well, but it's out there, and I think everybody should explore those resources for sure. So I guess, just to kind of start wrapping up a little bit, I guess building a career, sitting in discomfort, what has that taught you about resilience? Or is there anything that really stands out to you about just kind of like being in that discomfort? Does that make sense?
I don't know. I think just when I decided to, I don't know if this is what you mean, but I really didn't want to make the jump to go to the funeral home, because I don't know what I was afraid of, but I was just afraid of everything. And it took me a really long time. Is this right? Am I on the right track?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's just, well, and I think I guess maybe the better thing would be like the whole situation of like the resilience of not taking no for an answer. You know what I mean? Like, and whether it's, going through grief, you can, everybody has their own journey, but realistically, it would be very easy to stay in bed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In the same sense as once you decided that you want to work at Bear Creek, it'd be very easy to say, if they have a position open, I'll go there. Right. But you built this resilience through like, I'm doing this, I'm going to build this life, I'm going to surround myself with these people. And I guess I've just seen you build that resilience. So I guess the question would be, what was the question again? What has grief taught you about that resilience, and how has grief showed you that you just need to kind of keep pushing?
Yeah, probably just what you just explained there exactly is just, for me, like 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have said that I was ready to work at a funeral home, but I just kept working at it. I kept reading, and I don't know, everybody has their own ways of healing, but doing the things that I needed to do to make myself a little bit better every day. And then I just decided that, I'm going to message and I'm going to go there and just hope for the best and do it. And I remember we had a conversation, like you just kept saying, well, like, what's the worst that could happen? I was nothing, but it's just like, I was afraid. I think I was just afraid that like I would not be able to do it, and then I would be crushed that I couldn't help people. Yeah. I guess was the scariest part of it. So, but yeah, when I finally sent that email and said like, if you have time for an interview, I'd love to come in or whatever, just to chat. It felt real good to get that out. I was very scared, but yeah, it was huge for me to take that step and just send that email, as silly as that sounds. But that was like a really important part of my life, was just being able to do it. So I'm glad I took that step, and I'm glad that they emailed back and said I could come in, because my life has changed ever since.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and just the strength that you showed, because I was like, I like to be, sometimes I err on the side of like overly optimistic and positive, which is probably a little bit annoying, but I was also like just encouraging, just to, I also said, go to Lululemon or go just get a job to get back in the swing of things or whatever. But I think the resilience that you showed, and just like that, again, that resolution of saying, no, this is what I'm doing, I think is very cool. So I guess having talked about all this, exploring your journey, maybe one question that kind of comes to mind would be, if your mom was in the room right now, what do you think she'd say to you?
I don't know. I'm not saying anything. I'll start crying. That she was proud of me, obviously. Like, this is like, well, I don't think she would have ever pictured me here, and I definitely never pictured me here, but it's a big deal to, she never really experienced a lot of grief in her life either. So, I mean, my dad's side, unfortunately, has lost a few people, so she would have lost like her mother and father-in-law at a pretty young age. And then like her parents, actually my grandma passed a year after my mom did, and my grandpa is still with us, so she wasn't really close to like a lot of grief, so I don't think she ever really went through something like this. So yeah, I think she'd be proud of how I'm doing, I think. Yeah.
She'd be shocked and proud, I think.
Yeah, like, shocked is probably a huge one, because I also am. Yeah. No,
it'd be tremendously proud. I'm sure she's proud. Okay. I guess, and I just really appreciate you sharing. Right? Sorry to kind of make you tear up a couple times, but I think it's just, you've done such a...
But that's okay. You're allowed to tear up.
Yeah, totally. Good point. But you've done so well, and just kind of like, I think it's tremendous, and like kind of putting this out there, this whole podcast thing, and like a lot of it geared around the idea to talk to you about this and share it with people. So
you made a whole podcast just to talk to me?
Well, not the whole, I mean, yeah, kind of. Like, I think it's when I started thinking about it, it's like, obviously I've done stuff where I've had to push through discomfort, or I've chose to push through discomfort. And I know other people have, but you're right at the top of that list. And like, if you look at the whole premise of the podcast being, everything you want is right on the other side of discomfort, and you get to make that choice, and you get to like push through the thing. And I hate saying push through when we're talking about grief, because it's not a push through thing necessarily, but it's like, growing through it, I guess. It's definitely geared around stories like yours, and just sharing that with people, where it's not always about, the CEO that has the home run idea, or, the fitness trainer that, has these great plans that you should follow. It's a lot of times it's about conversations, and like everybody's got this journey, and yours is very specific, and it's very important. And I think it's crucial to share. It was crucial for me to kind of be arm in arm with you for it. And I think it's crucial to share that with a lot of people. So, I think there's a lot of people that needed to hear this. But before we go, I guess what's one thing, I'll throw you on the spot again. What's one thing that you're still working on when it comes to getting uncomfortable? Like where's one spot where you want to grow? Where's one thing?
One thing that I know I need to work on is, so after my mom passed, shortly, I was already it was just a rough time. And shortly after that, our daughter went through some health things, and that sparked a lot of health anxiety in me. And so typically now when people get a little bit sick, my anxiety, or I don't know if I should say anxiety, but my emotions are very through the roof, and that's something I need to work on a little bit. But also I've been pretty good at,
which you have, right?
Figuring out how to deal with that, and knowing that it's okay when people are sick, but it's when you go through something like that where somebody wasn't really that sick and you lose them suddenly, it's like not the case for everybody, but for me, was like, just anytime something bad happens, that's just where your brain goes. So to like retrain your brain to think that like that's okay, like you don't have to worry, like that's been a pretty big struggle of mine, but I'm dealing with it. Yeah, you are. And it's cool to watch, and again, like your growth in so many different aspects of life. And I know when we tried to do the episode before too, I brought up skipping, which I think is just a cool thing. It's just like, these are things that you would have never, I don't think you would have ever really done, whether it's like your fitness journey, your skipping, your job. I could just see. Life is short. That's why I do all those things now.
It's awesome. Okay. Well, again, I appreciate it. I appreciate you sharing. Appreciate you guys coming to our home this evening, this beautiful Saturday evening. So if this resonated with you, hopefully it did. Hopefully there's someone out there that can get some value out of this conversation. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Love to, see some messages. Love to, if you guys want to pass on some messages to Ashley as well. And again, if this resonated, if this was valuable, I'd love for you to share it along. We'll put the subscribe thing up here. If you want to message us, reach out to me on Instagram. But yeah, thanks again for joining us. And thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll have a nice big hug after I turn the camera off, but yeah. Okay. I think it's weird that I said we'll have a nice big hug after.
Yeah. And then I was going to make some sort of weird comment. You could probably cut that out, can't you? Or I don't know how that works.